It's a bit of an English teacher's favourite, this one, so get ready for some unbridled enthusiasm as we have a look at the poem Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So the poem was written in 1817, around the time that the British Museum was having part of the statue shipped over to Britain. And the statue was of Ramesses II, the Egyptian pharaoh who died in about 1213 BC, having ruled for more than 60 years. The statue which inspired this poem can in fact still be seen in the British Museum today. Now, in the poem, the speaker recalls how he met a traveller from an ancient land who has seen the ruin of a statue in the desert consisting of a pair of legs without a body and a half-buried broken face. The traveller recounts the expression on the face of the statue with wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command, which reveals quite a lot about his style of leadership, while also commenting on the qualities of the sculptor. And around the base of the statue are those famous words, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair, which is where the central irony in the poem occurs. And at the end, here, we're left with an image of the vast, barren, featureless landscape in which the ruined statue now stands. There are three different voices that we hear in the poem. Firstly, the voice of the poet, Shelley, who in the first 10 words recalls meeting a traveller from a faraway country, and the rest of the poem, which is unhighlighted here, is written in reported speech, as Shelley, the narrator, tells us what the traveller told him. And this is a deliberate distancing technique employed by Shelley to highlight the obscurity which this once powerful leader has fallen into. It's taken a traveller from far away to make the narrator even aware of the existence of such a ruler. And when we learn of the statue, we do not see it with our own eyes, but we're told about it from someone else, who in turn was told about it by someone else. The third and final voice is that of Ozymandias himself, whose words are chiselled into the pedestal upon which the ruin stands. The fact that there are these different voices heard in the poem is one of the reasons Shelley wrote it in iambic pentameter, which is this 10-syllable line structure with 5 beats, where the emphasis falls on every other beat, creating a rhythm which is supposed to represent the way people actually speak. It's also a structure used by writers like Shakespeare, for example, when he wanted to communicate something important. The poem is written in the form of a sonnet, and students sometimes ask me what the difference is between form and structure. Well, think of form as type, so in this case a sonnet, while structure means the organisation of lines and rhymes within that form. So the structure of a sonnet is usually pretty uniform. They have 10-syllable lines, they have a total of 14 lines, and those 14 lines can either be structured using an octave and a sestet, which means a group of 8 lines followed by a group of 6 lines, or the alternative way of structuring them is using 3 groups of 4 lines or quatrains followed by a rhyming couplet. But the curious thing about this sonnet is that it follows neither structure. It's a kind of messy sonnet where the octave bleeds into the sestet, as I've indicated here. So let's now have a look at the traveller's account, which begins in line 2 by him saying that 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. And these 2 adjectives, vast and trunkless, indicate 2 important things about the statue and, by implication, Ozymandias himself. Vast tells us about the size of the statue, but also the amount of power he has, while trunkless refers to the fact that the body of Ozymandias is missing, and of course this is where his heart would be. And evidence that Ozymandias was a cruel and heartless leader can be found elsewhere in the poem. We're next told that near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. Now, the word visage means face, and the detail that this is half sunk is one which works as a metaphor for the way in which this once all-powerful leader is disappearing into obscurity, and that there is a much greater power working against him. Shelley then adds 3 revealing details about the shattered face of Ozymandias, describing him as having a frown, this wrinkled lip, and a sneer. And all these suggest an unkind, tyrannical leader who led through fear and who held his people in contempt, almost mocking them with his smug cruelty. Shelley, using the voice of the traveller, remember, then turns his attention to the skill of the sculptor, who well those passions read. In other words, the sculptor understood very clearly what lay beneath the surface of Ozymandias and what drove him to even greater power and control, and moreover was able to capture these passions in the face of the sculpture. The next line is a good example of where the pentametric structure of the poem, which remember means 10 syllables per line, 5 beats per line, with the emphasis falling on every other beat, means that the emphasis falls on the word yet here, which means still. And this is where we see Shelley, the poet, playing with the idea of power. Ozymandias has been forgotten, and his once majestic sculpture is a wreck. Yet the power of the sculptor, the artist, has survived. The next line is slightly ambiguous. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. So the hand that mocked them is clearly another reference to the sculptor, but the word mock carries a couple of different interpretations. Firstly, it could simply mean to replicate or to make an imitation, which is precisely what he has done. But the more familiar meaning of the word is to make fun of. So perhaps by carving this expression into the stone, the sculptor is deliberately casting Ozymandias in a negative light for amusement. The heart that fed is perhaps even more ambiguous, but may well refer to the subject of the artist's work, Ozymandias himself, who had a heart that preyed on his people and used them for his own gain. Remember that I mentioned earlier that the heart or trunk of the ruler are missing. The next part of the poem is where the central irony occurs, as our attention is turned to the words chiselled into the pedestal of the statue. And I want to have a look particularly at the second part here. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. It's a challenge sent out to all other rulers and leaders that they will never be as strong or as powerful as he is, that they will observe the great deeds that he has done and bemoan their own personal sense of failure. And this is magnificently juxtaposed with nothing beside remains, which illustrates how spectacularly Ozymandias has failed in his boast. It's a device known as hubris, or showing excessive pride or conceit. And you may well have heard the expression pride before a fall. Well, that's exactly what is happening here. In the final part of the poem, Shelley shows us where the real power lies, and that's with the joint forces of nature and time. The words decay and wreck illustrate again what these forces have done to the statue of Ozymandias, and surrounding this is the evidence of the immeasurable power of time. Sand, which at one point was rock, but which the elements have ground down over millions of years, and which the statue, of course, is well on its way to returning. The abrupt combination of alliteration, specifically plosives with boundless and bare, are shocking. And the adjective boundless at the end of the poem reminds us of the word vast at the beginning, links to his perceived power against the greater power of time, while the heavy, dull, liquid sounds expressed through the combination of lone and level illustrate the bleak, lonely and featureless landscape where the statue of the once mighty now resides.